breeders have gotten it pretty much everything they asked for at this point and want to know what it's going to take at this point to get this passed, to get these rules passed.
Well, I think the rules will be passed at this point. I mean, we don't know what will be in the rules. Hopefully, the rules don't violate civil rights, constitutional rights, as the original ones did. And I know that there has been some attempts and some efforts to cure those problems. Until we see the final result, we can't say, if they're acceptable or if they're unacceptable, because they are literally changing every day right now.
But you're still fighting them.
I'm not fighting them, not at this point. When they exempted the USDA breeders, that's when I said, okay, we'll just have to wait and see at this point. I mean, because the rules are going to be passed. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I believe if they were disallowed by the legislature, I believe that the governor would pass them in. The rules will go into effect. The only question is what the final rules will be, and if they will violate civil rights, and how they're going to fund this agency.
But isn't it true that breeders that are regulated by the USDA get away with quite a bit because there's no form of discipline once they've been fined or something, once they've been cited by the USDA? There's nothing that the USDA can do to them.
They get 3 chances and they're out. They lose their license. And you can go on to a public website under the Freedom of Information Act and check any breeder that you would like. The USDA inspections are fairly stringent. They're unannounced. They're required to have a vet check. And like I say, they get 3 chances and then their license will be pulled. So as far as enforcement, they can be fined, they can be ordered to change things, but at the end of the day, if they do not have a reputable, healthy operation for their animals, they will lose their licensure.
Okay. But there's no, as far as, felony animal cruelty and things like that, if they were to come across that, it wouldn't, they couldn't be punished in that way, correct?
Well, if they were to come across that, then that would be for law enforcement to take care of. That should be reported, and that is already covered in our criminal codes. We need enforcement of our animal cruelty code.
That's a whole
Yes.
ball of wax.
Yes.
I want to get back though to the fact that what you were talking about with having to rebuild these kennels and stuff that wouldn't meet the guidelines. It sounds to me like a lot of this is about the money.
It's all about the money. It's all about the money.
A lot of people feel like the animals aren't being considered by the breeders and the things that they have to go through. A lot of people would be, and I'm just speaking from people that I'm playing devil's advocate here because I've talked to these people, they would be disgusted to hear the comments that you made about the 3 breeding cycles in 18 months and that all breeding females should be allowed to be bred every single time they come into.
I would advise them to call Brian Renniger. He's in McAllister. He's a veterinarian. He's also a state representative. He can explain that, and he's the expert. He can explain that. Allow him to explain that.
But when it comes to the money, a lot of people feel like, it shouldn't be all about the money. It should be about the animals and their welfare as well.
Okay. It should be about the rights of people. Because at the end of the day, as I read the Constitution, animals don't have rights. People have rights. People have a right to gainful employment of their choosing. And at the end of the day, it is about the money because the state will suffer economically. This will ultimately become the burden of the taxpayers, and as soon as they are finished with regulation of the animals, it will move on to livestock. Legislation was introduced this year to impose these same restrictions upon livestock and poultry.
It's not in this bill though, I mean, I'm focusing on this bill. I mean, this is just,
Yes, but that is one of the results, it's one of the unintended consequences of this legislation. All legislation has unintended consequences. And one of those consequences from this bill will be that it will be carried on to livestock, which is even more.
it's my understanding that livestock's already regulated
Dogs are already regulated.
by the USDA.
Yes.
But it's my understanding that, livestock is already regulated by the state.
If they are, I'm unaware of it.
Okay, I'll have to check on that.
They may be. If they are, then I wouldn't understand why they introduced HB 1306 this session to create the Livestock Care Standards Act.
Well, the reason I think that is because when I talked to Senator Wyrick, one of the reasons that he was against this Pet Breeders Act was because he said that he's lived how the state regulates livestock. He's a cattle rancher. So I'll have to look into that a little bit more.
And it will get worse for him if that's the case. I mean, I don't know. I don't purport to know about the law with respect to cattle.
Let's talk about taxes. One of the claims that the other side has made is that many of these breeders don't pay and remit sales taxes. Do you know that to be true about some of the breeders that you represent, or have you asked them about that?
As far as I know, the breeders sell across state lines, so they're not required to collect state sales tax for those animals, which is, for a USDA licensed breeder, they're required to be licensed by the USDA because they sell to brokers or pet shops. And that product almost always is going out of state, so there isn't sales tax on that.
But what about do you only represent USDA breeders, or are there some that are not USDA?
Yes, I represent some who are not USDA hobby
Okay.
breeders.
So they would not then, they could be selling in state.
Sure, I'm sure they are, and I have not broached that subject with them. I don't know, and if I did, frankly, I probably wouldn't tell you because it would be privileged information.
So you don't know if they collect sales tax or not in Oklahoma?
I do not. I have not asked.
Okay. Because that's such one of the, cornerstones of the argument against your argument, I would think that would be kind of important to know.
Well, here's the situation with the taxes. If we want to get into the taxes, if you license each and every breeder with a state license, and they obtain their state sales tax permit and all of that, they are going to receive exemptions on their tax exemptions on their dog food, their supplies, their medications for their animals, everything that it takes to run a kennel. And I know firsthand it takes a lot to run a kennel. Those items are currently purchased in Oklahoma, and sales tax is paid on those. You take these breeders who are selling hundreds of thousands of dollars of dogs across state lines, they're going to receive that sales tax exemption, and that money leaves Oklahoma, so Oklahoma loses.
What about the ones that are selling here in state though? Because I've looked, there are some, it doesn't take long to find some that sell a lot of dogs right here in Oklahoma.
Well, if that's the case, that's the law. If you have a retail business in the state of Oklahoma, you are supposed to pay sales tax. And I would advise any breeder who falls under those parameters to, if they are not, to start paying sales tax. That's just common sense. That's the law, and I would not advise any of my clients to break that law.
And so, but the Pet Breeders Act would require them to get a state tax ID?
Yes, that's one of the requirements, yes.
Okay. Has anyone talked to you about how they feel about that?
Not as far as well, we just don't want to get a tax ID number. No, the only feedback that I have received is the point that the 661 USDA licensed breeders in the state of Oklahoma are going to be buying all of these supplies and not paying sales tax on it, and then they're going to be sending all of these animals across state lines and not receiving sales tax for it. So Oklahoma loses.
Okay. Okay, anything else you want to add?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I just, the main reason, that I agreed to do this interview was to bring out my side of what happened at the Capitol. The profanity was not the F-bomb. Constitutionally, I could have used the F-bomb, but I didn't. And I made the point that I made with that sentence is one that most Oklahomans would agree with. Why are the rights of animals more important than the rights of children?
We have laws that protect our children.
The laws don't protect our children. I can go through my file cabinet and show you file after file after file of children who are abused and neglected, and I can't get anything done about it. You make your reports to DHS, and that's not slamming DHS in any way. They're underfunded, they're undermanned.
Yeah.
They need the attention of our legislatures.
But okay. So you don't regret the use of profanity, and while you said the Nazi comment happened after you were there, many people feel like you agree with that sentiment, that you feel like the Commercial Pet Breeders Act are a lot of Nazis.
The Commercial Pet Breeders Board?
Yes.
I don't know that I believe that they're Nazis. I believe that they have an agenda, an animal rights agenda. If that makes them a Nazi, then, but I don't know that I would just step right out and say, Sue Ann Ham, you're a Nazi. No. I believe that they have agendas.
Okay, anything else you want to add?
Sorry. Just that, I think this problem, I think we are throwing good money after bad. Regulate the unregulated breeders, use some common sense, and move on. Quit wasting our money.
So you're okay with regulating the unregulated breeders?
Absolutely.
The ones that are not USDA, because some of those are your clients.
Absolutely. And as I said before, I have not heard one client say that they have a problem with being regulated. I've not heard one of my clients say, oh, I don't want to be regulated by anybody.
Mm-hmm.
The ones who are already regulated by the federal government don't want to be re-regulated. And the ones who are not, I believe it's the consensus, they want the right to choose to, who regulates me. But I've made it clear to them, regulation is here. You have to deal with it.
Okay.
We just have a little bit.
Yeah. You need to get shots of me sitting. Is that good enough? I have seen this argument get heated enough to where, that's great. Thank you.
Sorry, turn that off for a second there.
I'll grab it.
Okay. I have heard this argument get heated enough where some breeders have said that there could be violence. Have you heard that?
I have heard that. What you have to recognize is there is violence on both sides. 4 kennels have already burned in Arkansas. The death threats are out of control. I have a file over here of FBI investigations on death threats with respect to breeders.
In Oklahoma?
Yes. The FBI here in Tulsa is covering some of those. There's violence on both sides of the issue. I mean, as with anything, any controversial issue, you will have people who go to the extreme, and it will come to violence. I think.
Don't mind me, I'm